Yevgeny Prigozhin spent nearly a decade constructing the Wagner paramilitary faction. It became pivotal to Russia's military campaign in Ukraine, and Prigozhin's forces assisted in disseminating Russian influence globally, supporting associates of President Vladimir Putin in Africa and Syria. The recent news of his purported demise has triggered a surge of conjecture concerning the future of the group. Western security authorities are pondering over the identity of his successor, and the trajectory the mercenaries he once commanded will undertake. Ensure you stay well informed by subscribing to our channel, Slant News. We provide the latest, most credible news. Thank you for considering us. The question arises, who will assume the reins of Wagner now? Dr. Joanna de Deus Pereira, a senior research fellow at the Royal United Services Institute, RUSI, shared with BBC's World Tonight program that Prigozhin's passing is likely to prompt a certain revamping within the faction. However, she opined that on the whole, Wagner's activities will likely persist much as they did under Prigozhin's stewardship. The organization will endure into the future, probably under a different name, yet it has already demonstrated its capacity to adjust and evolve, she articulated. We must regard Wagner not merely as an individual, but as an ecosystem, akin to a multi-headed hydra with diverse interests spanning Africa. Ruslan Trad, a security analyst from the Atlantic Council, concurred. He informed the media that Prigozhin's death would probably result in the installment of an individual with affiliations to Russia's military intelligence agency, the GRU, to lead the faction. Nonetheless, he contended that Mr. Putin's primary challenge might revolve around identifying an individual with substantial financial resources to sustain the paramilitarist activities, all while avoiding a direct confrontation with his regime. They will seek a new financier, as Prigozhin was the primary financial source, Mr. Trad noted. Finding a new financier might pose a greater challenge because Wagner boasts competent commanders, yet funding is of utmost significance. Perhaps they will select an individual from Putin's close inner circle. Benoit Bringer, a journalist whose documentary, The Rise of Wagner, chronicled the paramilitary group's ascent, divulged to the media that one of the prominent contenders is GRU General Andrei Averyanov. It is plausible that Putin required time to discreetly orchestrate the transition. This could account for why he waited 2 months before disengaging from Prigozhin, he supplemented. Emily Ferris from RUSI remarked that Moscow has likely internalized the lesson that figures like Prigozhin, with their perilous ambitions, are uncertain variables. She appended, it is probable that any new Wagner leader would be an individual meticulously chosen by the Kremlin. What lies ahead for Wagner's forces in Belarus and Ukraine? Over the greater part of the preceding year, Wagner stood as Russia's most adept combat unit in Ukraine, achieving triumph in capturing the eastern urban centers of Soledar and Bakhmut following intense clashes. Nevertheless, Ms. Ferris expressed the view that Prigozhin's demise is improbable to exert significant influence on the trajectory of the conflict. Wagner's troops have remained inactive in Ukraine since the uprising, while some have been stationed in Belarus or reintegrated into the Ministry of Defense. Thus, the immediate ramifications for the ongoing Ukrainian war, where Russian forces are presently fending off the Ukrainian counteroffensive, are likely to remain modest for the time being, she noted. Furthermore, she surmised that it appears improbable for Wagner's units to swiftly return to the Ukrainian battleground. Reportedly, approximately 8,000 Wagner troops are situated at encampments within Belarus, having followed Prigozhin there subsequent to his thwarted insurrection in June. Concurrently, imagery obtained from satellite assessments by Media Verify unveils the gradual dismantling of several tents at Wagner's primary encampment in Osipovichy, located southeast of the Belarusian capital, Minsk. Some tents have been either completely or partially disassembled. The photographic evidence has been sourced from the US-based firm, Planet Labs. Precise details about the commencement of this process and whether the occupants of these tents have relocated elsewhere within Belarus, or exited the country remain unclear. As of Thursday, the Radio Free Europe Radio Liberty Media Consortium, funded by the US, disclosed that 101 out of 273 tents at the camp had already undergone disassembly. Notably, Belarus, a pivotal Russian ally in the Ukraine incursion, has refrained from issuing any public statements on this matter. However, the fate of the Wagner combatants remains uncertain, and certain posts on social media have intimated that a number of soldiers have made overt threats against Mr. Putin, attributing to him a role in Prigozhin's passing. Can Wagner's troops in Africa and Syria sustain their combat efforts? Equally enigmatic is the destiny of Wagner's forces overseas. The organization has evolved into a pivotal cornerstone of Russia's external strategy, its units bolstering administrations in Syria, Mali, the Central African Republic, and Libya, securing valuable mining privileges in return. In recent times, Prigozhin was purportedly in West Africa, where Western analysts apprehend the group sought to extend its influence into other nations, including Niger, presently facing the aftermath of a coup. Speculation arose that the decapitation of the leadership could prompt Russia to re-evaluate its influence pursuits in the region. Nonetheless, numerous specialists contend that the group's decentralized authority on the continent should enable it to sustain operations undeterred by Prigozhin's demise. Post the mutiny in June, Russian officials purportedly visited Libya to confer with Khalifa Haftar, the insurgent general challenging the UN-sanctioned government in Tripoli, and assured him of Wagner Group's unwavering support, irrespective of Prigozhin's fate. Mr. Trad conveyed to the media his conviction that Wagner's deep integration within the defense structure of African nations would shield its operations from disruption following Prigozhin's passing. The commanders stationed in Syria, Central African Republic, or Mali, have already established effective models and operational autonomy, he elucidated. Localized commanders remain unimpeded as their activities operate independently with distinct resources, and they are currently recruiting for operations in Syria and Africa. He emphasized the group's detached relationship with Russian intelligence as an invaluable asset for Moscow, allowing it to navigate the gray zone, pursuing Russian interests while officially disavowing involvement. Mr. Bringer conveyed to the media that Wagner held a vital role in Africa, in terms of advancing Russian objectives. The structure will undoubtedly endure there, possibly under a different banner than Wagner, yet with a new leader devoted to the Kremlin, he asserted. Anton Mardasov, a non-resident scholar at the Middle East Institute Syria program, remarked that even in the wake of Prigozhin's thwarted uprising, Wagner commanders abroad largely escaped retribution from the Kremlin to prevent undermining Moscow's broader position. Nevertheless, he noted the emergence of other private military companies challenging Wagner's prominence in Syria. Subsequent to June's mutiny, Mr. Mardasov disclosed that certain Wagner troops had been offered reassignment to a competing entity named PMC Redat. Redat has been concurrently active in Syria alongside Wagner for a considerable period, he disclosed to the media. The military establishment in Syria is now placing its bets on Redat, although there was apprehension about hastening the process. Shall Wagner quickly fade into obscurity? In the medium term, it seems improbable that its operations will suffer significant ramifications due to its benefactor's demise. Yet, in the long run, Wagner's activities appear poised for transformation, as suggested by Emily Ferris of Ruzi. The likeliest scenario entails Wagner fragmenting into two factions, the leaderless groups within Belarus disbanding, and the remaining faction operating abroad evolving into a different entity conducive to furthering Russian foreign policy objectives, she elucidated to the media. Regarding Prigozhin's legacy, Mr. Bringer communicated that Wagner had illustrated to the Kremlin the utility of a clandestine private army operating beyond legal constraints, as a means of waging hybrid warfare and extending international influence. He added, the name Wagner might fade, but the field mercenaries and the strategies he pioneered will persist.